YouTube! Today we're going to do a posing session for the Hottoys Spiderman red and blue suit from the Spider-Man No Way Home movie. As always, we're going to do 5 poses, the first being the safe pose. This will be excellent for anyone who prioritizes durability. The second pose will be a bit more dynamic, not ultra dynamic, but dynamic enough so that creases will occur. The third pose will be a pose inspired by actual source material, in this case the promo poster. The fourth pose will be a pose with uneven footing, and the diorama set that came with the deluxe is excellent for that. And as always, the fifth pose will be a dynamic pose. Let's get posing. Straight out of the box, this is what the figure looks like, and as you can see the arms are spread apart a bit. And it seems like you can't get them flush, but you actually can if you push up the shoulder a bit, then you can get the arms flush, and that looks a bit better on certain poses. This is not unique to this figure, this goes for most Hot Toys bodies, to be honest. And for the second tip, what I like to do when I change hands is bend the wrist a little bit, then put my nail on top of the wrist peg to keep it from popping out, and then pulling the hand out. The third tip is just making sure that the web shooters and the lining on the suit are placed properly, so it just doesn't throw the aesthetics off. Depending on the pose, it might take some fidgeting to also cover up the wrist peg properly. Now for the first pose, it doesn't really take that much, but if you manipulate every joint a little bit, it can take a figure just looking like a doll into actually looking pretty realistic. As you can see, for this first pose, it only took a bit of the manipulation of the joints, like the left leg and his arms, and switching the hands out to make it an actual pose instead of leaving him in a museum pose. Basically, if you want to portray a confident posture, the pelvis and the chest of the figure should point forward a bit. And in posing, you can easily achieve that by manipulating the legs a bit outwards and backwards. And after that, it's just really micro adjustments. Just take a look at every joint and see if it looks natural or not. And then you'll get this. Pose number 2, even though we said creases can occur, you still want to minimize actual damage to the suit. So a technique you'll want to use for every joint is actually pulling out the fabric out of the joint. So I just did that for the hip, and I'm also going to do it for the knee, as you see here. So with my thumb, I pull out the fabric, and then I bend the joint. And I do the same for the hip. So with my thumb, I'm just pulling down on the suit so it won't get caught, and then I bend the joint. So for this pose, I wanted to have Peter standing on the roof and then looking over New York. And I wanted to portray him the second after he jumps on that spot on the roof. And to sell that story of the pose, I have his back leg outstretched and his upper body pointing forward. And while doing this, I got the idea to make the pose a bit more interesting, and that means displaying actually 2 movements. First movement is the movement of Peter jumping on the roof, and the second movement is him after jumping on the roof looking backwards to look over New York. And I think the concept of displaying 2 motions makes the pose a bit more interesting, because instead of a photograph, it kind of makes you see like a few seconds, 5 to 10 seconds of an actual scene. Well, in my mind at least. Let me know in the comments down below if this works the same for you. I'm really curious. So after fixing his lower body to jump up on the roof, now I had to look for angles of his arms to fit the second idea of him looking backwards, looking over New York. And then I could totally see a scene with Tom Holland jumping on the roof, taking his mask off, and then looking backwards. So then we got to this. change this pose up with Peter shooting his web with his right arm, and then you need to compensate the left arm for that movement. And of course, you can always do the same pose with the masked head sculpt, as you can see right here. So next up is pose number 3, the pose inspired by actual source material. For this pose I chose this specific movie poster. And this might come as a surprise, but for me this was actually the most intricate pose I did for the video. Now after obviously turning the head, I had to select hands to use with this pose, and I thought these would fit best. Then I had to think how to recreate sort of a slouch or the contemplating position, and I think that needs to have the shoulders forward. Now you could say, oh wow, I'm almost done, but of course just having it from the back wouldn't be that interesting. So I thought about what the picture actually means or could mean and make an actual pose facing forward so we could see the actual full body. Now deciding this gave me a few challenges. Firstly, there's no real lower body shown on the picture, of course, so we had to make that up, just seeing what makes sense, and facing this one forward makes it a bit trickier to pull off, so that's where the micro adjustments came in. When it comes to deciding how to pose the lower body, the picture kind of shows that the hips are uneven in this pose. If you've seen my Black Widow posing tutorial, you already know how this goes. First, you start off with the legs straight, and then you point one of them outwards. Then you twist the figure at its hips, and after that you just correct the upper body so it fits the pose. And in this case, because I wanted to portray a less confident pose, I decided to have most of his weight on his left leg to our right, and the right leg being on the ball of his foot. And after that, it's just micro adjustments really, and that's nothing more than just looking at the figure and just seeing if to your eye it actually looks natural. And don't be afraid to be hypercritical about it looking natural or not, because these hot toys are made to be able to achieve a really natural pose. So if it looks stiff or it looks like a doll, just fix the joint. And after that I was just aligning the sleeves to match the hands, and then I added the mask. The look I was going for was a less confident, more pensive kind of pose, maybe thinking about what he's going to do or what he did or what's happened or the consequences of it, and I think this pose really portrays it well. Let me know what you guys think of it. So as a fourth pose, I always try to do a pose on unequal footing on these tutorials, but of course the second one was already on a snow base. So to switch things up, I thought I'd make it an extremely uneven footing. To be honest, this pose is pretty straightforward. You'll need something to elevate your base, and you'll need the grabbing hand, and when you bend the joints, try to not have the fabric be pinched inside the joints like I showed earlier. And as with every pose, I would advise you to think about the story about the pose and not just a static pose, because I think that help the pose look a bit more natural. So try to think about the movement, think about the story, think about where he came from and what he's doing at the moment. For this pose, obviously Peter is on the ladder looking over New York, but I'm imagining that first he was climbing the ladder either upwards or downwards. I think in this case it doesn't really matter. And then he's opening the pose up to look over New York. So in portraying this pose, that would mean that his left side would open up a bit more towards us. So after setting the basic frame for the pose, I just try to portray that the left side is actually opening up. So I'm rotating his upper leg outwards, his upper left leg, and his foot also. And I'll do the same with the shoulder and the arm. So as you can see here, I'm maneuvering the arm, and I'm straightening it up a bit more to show that his arm is a bit more relaxed than the position it was in earlier. And after that, I just try to align the suit a bit better and iron out the wrinkles. And that's it. So the fifth pose is going to be the least complicated pose. It's going to be the dynamic pose. And you've probably seen a pose like this done like 1,000 times already. Just make sure, as always, that you don't let the suit come inside the joints, because it'll become pinched and then it'll actually damage it. And if you don't, you'll only get creases, and sometimes it'll even just iron itself out. My experience is that the suit is usually pretty okay if you do it carefully, but then again, I don't mind a couple of creases if that means I'll get like a sick pose. And like I said, this pose is going to be pretty straightforward. You just bend like every joint almost at the maximum, as to where it still seems natural, or natural for a Spider-Man figure. Now, as you can see here, the connection is a bit different than the other Spider-Man figures we got so far. At least the Tom Holland Spiderman figures we got so far. So if you bend the head a bit too much, it'll just come off. Now, as you see this pose, it's still not right, because we still need to bend the torso and the abs a bit more. So it's actually looking more dynamic. And after that, it's just micro adjusting again. Just check every joint and just see if you think it looks natural. And again, just be super critical about it, and fix a joint that you're not comfortable with. Now, accessories which in real life would be not rigid at all, but are rigid here, they're kind of a pet peeve for me, because I always try to have the accessory match the story. And since they're starting doing this piece, I have struggled with how to position the piece that's wrapped up and the end. Because if you're in a swing, the end should actually follow the motion of the swing, like the other piece did before we got this one. So in this piece it's a bit more difficult, because if the end of the web is pointing forward, it kind of means that Spidey is slinging backwards. So I've always struggled with finding ways to make this piece look natural, even though I really love the idea of having like a wrapped up piece of webbing in his hand. So the way I try to solve it here is having the wrapped piece plus the end of the webbing pointing backwards. So now it matches the swing of Spidey, but it kind of puts his hand in an awkward position. Other than that, I think we're pretty much here. We still need to add the webbing. And then, the same as when characters are shooting a gun, try to align the line of vision with the direction the web is going at. And then if you want to shoot a video, then just check if this pose looks alright from every angle, and then you're done. So these were the 5 poses for this tutorial. I know it's been a while, but I really hope you still enjoyed this tutorial on the Spider-Man red and blue suit from No Way Home. I think this is the best Tom Holland Spider-Man figure we got till this day. Well, probably until the artisan version of the Iron Spider will come out, because that thing looks good. But I've really been enjoying this figure. And I hope you have or will too. Now I will start uploading more videos again. So please let me know what you thought about this tutorial and if you have any requests of videos to have a tutorial on. Now if you really like posing 6-scale figures, don't forget to join our Facebook group 6-scale posers for some very cool posing content. We have some pretty talented members over there. And as always, don't pose beyond your comfort level, but keep posing everyone.